So you are reading today from one of your historical romances, An Inconvenient Earl.
Yes.
What should we know about An Inconvenient Earl and the scene that we're going to hear?
Inconvenient Earl is, I call it lovers to enemies to it's complicated. It's a story of an earl, presumably, who really does not want to be in a position of power. He has dyslexia, he has anxiety. None of these things are named in the book because we didn't have that language at that time, but he's basically desperately trying to get out of his responsibilities. And his daydream is that somebody like his secret lover will perhaps conveniently kidnap him and whisk him away to some magical land where he has no responsibilities and nothing bad ever happens. This
Love
obviously
it.
goes very, very badly because it's a novel. And so, yes, Ralph is essentially trying to struggle with his position in the world and not feeling like he deserves the privilege or the life that he leads, and is just like so many of us kind of looking for that knight in shining armor to kind of sweep him away and let him start a new
Hmm.
life. So I'm going to read from chapter 4 and chapter 5. Ralph has just woken up with a very large hangover after going to meet his lover, and he's woken up with a hangover and is now wondering what exactly is going on because there's quite a lot of unanswered questions that he has to face right now.
Hmm. Intriguing.
Yes. So with no further ado, I shall read chapter 4, A Rude Awakening. The beam of sunlight had been chasing him across the pillow for some time. Ralph turned this way and that, but there was no escaping its hot glare. Groaning at the ache, gripping his head in its iron claws, he rolled onto his back. A line had been painted on his ceiling. A hitch part way made it look like a river drawn on a large map. He gazed at its familiar contours, unable to place it, nor to account why it had been painted on his bedroom ceiling. Memories of the previous night lurked darkly in the corners of his mind. He and Adam had been happy about something, then very, very sad. They had drunk an obscene quantity of wine, and ale, and something else, its bitter taint clinging to his teeth. He sat up cautiously, waiting for the wave of nausea to recede before reaching for the bell pull to summon his man Redmond, who was going to catch an earful for having left the bedroom curtains open. Except Ralph was not at home. That was not his ceiling. He was sitting on a straw mattress on a rough-hewn bedstand in a small, dirty room, lit by the beam of sunshine falling through the bleary glass of its one narrow window. A room he knew only by candlelight, yet he recognized it like he knew his lover's face. In a word, paradise. He lay back, pulling up the prickly blanket up to his nose to breathe in his lover's scent. So the darling man had made their dreams come true. The tangle of last night's memories began to unknot. Their frantic laughter, their tears of mourning, Ralph's lover aiding him up the stairs to this very room. Though of his waking up mostly dressed was any sign, that had been the extent of their encounter, for which he was happy to make amends as soon as they were reunited. Blinking against his robust and very inconvenient headache, he rose from bed. He rinsed his mouth with the stale water in the chipped ewer, then washed his face and hands. Shivering in the morning chill, he looked about for his coat. His shoes as well were nowhere to be found, nor his purse and what jewelry he'd worn. Clearly he'd been robbed. A useless effort, for his purse had been close to empty, and the jewels mere paste. Hopefully the tavern keeper had a pair of shoes Ralph might borrow, so he might at least get home. But when he tried the door, he found it locked. Usually his lover left the key in the hole. The room contained only the bedstand, a chair, and a table, one of its legs a different color of wood, for it replaced the leg they had broken. He searched fruitlessly for the key, even feeling along the door frame for an unseen niche. Despairing of choices, he knocked on the door, tentatively, then with force. The door swung inward suddenly, and like a dream made real, his lover slipped in, closing the door behind him. He was dressed for traveling, with a heavy cape over his jacket, the sheath of a knife knotted to his wide belt. I'm so glad to see you, Ralph said. They've taken everything. He gestured helplessly at his stockinged feet, the barren room. And you, were you robbed as well? His lover shook his head. He hadn't moved from the doorway, but as Ralph moved towards him, he stiffened. What's wrong? Ralph asked, stopping his advance. Other than my having been robbed. His expression stark, the man tossed a cloth bag onto the gritty floorboards between them. Put that on. We need to leave at once. The bag contained Ralph's shoes and coat and a similar cloak. Where are we going? He asked as he knelt to close his buckles. Feeling about under the mattress, his lover didn't reply. Very well, if he wished to play the role of villainous abductor to the hilt. And without further word, Ralph followed him out of the room, down the stairs, and out the back door. After close to an hour of walking, they left the southbound road and started moving through the woods. Though the undulating terrain resembled the land around Godden Hall, between their curving route around the rising hills and the clouds that had obscured the morning sky, Ralph soon lost sense of their direction. He guessed it to be midday when they stopped at the bend of a swiftly running creek. His shoes were beginning to chafe, as they were made for city streets, at most the occasional stable, and not for tromping over hills. He sat on a flattish rock by the water to remove them. As much as I enjoy surprises, it might be time to tell me where we're going, he said as he attempted to rub some feeling into his toes. I promise, our secrets are safe with me. Don't say such things, the other man gritted, his teeth bared. But my darling, his lover silenced him with a snarl and sharply raised hand, as though Ralph were an errant dog in want of a whipping. Don't ever call me that again. Whatever we had, whatever was between us, it dies today. I don't understand. With a shudder of unspeakable revulsion, the man drew his knife from its sheath. Does this make things clearer? Be serious, friend. I am entirely serious, and I am not your friend. His face a mask of hatred, he stepped towards Ralph, the hand-length blade gleaming dully in the gray light. Look, this is entirely unnecessary. I'm sorry those jewels of mine aren't worth anything. I never wear the good stuff when I come down here. Ralph was babbling, but the blade was very long, and the creek was very near, and he was already on his knees and short of options. But I assure you, I am very, very wealthy. I can get you whatever you want. You are in no position to bargain. Perhaps you don't realize just how wealthy I am. I have a very good idea, your lordship, his former lover, sneered, his lovely features contorted with disgust. I know exactly who you are, and I know what you're worth, and all of that won't be enough to buy your way free of me. Are you certain? Because it really is a considerable amount, and shut up! He lunged forward, bringing the knife to within an inch of Ralph's chin. One little prick for me and your life ends. I'll leave you to bleed to death all alone in this cursed forest. What is it you want? For you to do what you're told? Do I not deserve to know you don't deserve a damned thing? Now, are you going to behave yourself, or am I going to leave you here to die? Of course, because nothing Ralph desired could ever become his. No wanting, no heart-searing need had ever been enough to earn him the slightest shred of happiness. As his captor's knife retreated, he felt a single burning impulse to grab the man's hand, force an end to these endless losses. To do so was to give the victory to his enemies. He wanted to watch them burn. They walked for several hours more, up and down ever taller hills and along the stony valleys between. This late in the year, the trees had lost most of their leaves, their branches twining blackly against the sky's featureless smear of watery gray. As it grew darker, their progress slowed, until they seemed to be creeping through a twilit underworld, a purgatorial realm without destination or purpose. At last they descended a treacherous slope to the gorse-clogged valley floor, where they halted beside a hulking mound of stones, which proved to be the ruins of a small house. The thatch was missing from one end of the roof, the other end so rotted a small tree had sprouted beside the canting chimney. A corner of the single interior room had been used as a privy by its prior occupants, as well as an assortment of animal life. The man steered Ralph to a pile of juniper boughs and punked straw, which lay against the other wall. Put your hands behind your back. If you intend to kill me, can you please do it very quickly? Ralph said as he complied. That's an invitation to make it take longer. Oh, please don't make it take longer. I'm not going to hurt you, his captor replied sharply. I'm going to sleep, and you are going to stay absolutely still and silent while I do so. Is it really necessary to... Ow! Tie me so tightly? I won't run away, I promise. A promise is just words. I have no reason to trust you. Whereas I can't trust anyone but you. The man paused, and Ralph hurried on. Think of it from my perspective. I'm already incapacitated. He flexed his bound hands, the coarse rope pricking his skin. I don't have the slightest idea where we are. Anyone wandering about the woods in the middle of the night is unlikely to be the sort of person whose attention I wish to attract. They're as likely to kill you, bugger me, and rob us both blind as they are to offer me aid. I can't get much more helpless. He waited, the other man's ragged breath hot against his neck. You make a sound, the man grated, and I'll be making sure tomorrow's the worst day of your life. Pinching his lips closed, Ralph nodded, and then he was falling, his legs buckling under him as his captor prodded his knees into the back of Ralph's. The man heaved him onto his side, facing the wall of damp, chalky plaster. His shoulders were already beginning to ache. His feet were rubbed raw in countless places, the sole of one of his shoes starting to come away from the toe. He was very cold. the thin cloak offering scant protection against the damp air. None of these discomforts matched the agony within his heart. 2 days ago, everything had been as it should be. 2 days ago, he'd had a father and a lover and a future, or at the very least a vision of the future he desired. Now he had nothing at all, and it wasn't nearly as liberating as he'd dreamed. Don't speak, don't blub, don't make things worse. Don't let him know how much you hurt. Luckily, he had a lifetime of practice at shedding silent tears. Chapter 5, Knives and Spoons. I'll mention here, they've been lying to each other the whole time they've known each other. They don't actually know each other's name at all. So I will now be changing names, but it's still Ralph and Ryan are the same person. But Harry doesn't know that yet. So chapter 5, Knives and Spoons. As Ryan lay softly weeping, Harry walked away, out of the ruined cottage and into the black night. A dozen paces into the woods, he crouched, hugging his knees to his chest and biting his kneecaps to keep from screaming his frustration. This wasn't a bothersome task. This was torture, a deliberate and malicious punishment. The death of Harry's partner and friend not payment enough for their having disappointed one of Fisher's clever little gambits. He hated every part of this, hated that he was here in these wet, cold ruins in charge of a weeping earl, and not in that snug room over the watchmaker's shop, eating toasted cheese and drinking Bixby's cherry wine and planning their next take. What he might have been doing with the weeping man whose life he was presently ruining was too near to contemplate. Dreams of what it could have been, lost to him forever. He compelled himself to his feet. Exhaustion hung around his neck like iron chains, chains forged of 2 weeks of restless vigilance, the long night minding Ryan while he slept off his foul friend's drug, and the subsequent hours of travel on a deliberately indirect route Harry had plotted to confound both his captive and any pursuit. Ryan hadn't stirred and made no sound as Harry lowered himself onto the musty pallet beside him, lying back to back and keeping to the very edge. Having long ago broken through every boundary of physical intimacy with the other man, touching him bore no significance, yet Harry felt he was sharing a bed with a tiger, or a smoldering keg of powder, something seething with danger. At length he slept, lulled by Ryan's steady breath and the rhythmic tap of rain dripping from a broken rafter onto stone. When he woke, it was still dark. Ryan lay, as he had all night, on his side facing the dirty wall, his hands bound behind him. His hands. In the coldest hour of the night, Harry must have rolled over, for he was curled around Ryan, whose cupped hands neatly cradled Harry's balls. Stiff with the morning urgency, Harry's cock lay hard against Ryan's back. If either of them so much as sneezed... With excruciating slowness, he lifted his arm from around Ryan's waist, shifted his pose in minute adjustments until his cods were free of the newly minted Earl's slumbering grasp. Harry's cloak was snagged on a juniper branch protruding from beneath the heaped straw, and he lost several more minutes to unhooking it without jostling the other man or cursing aloud. By the time he got outside, the cold air had done its duty, and his relief was swiftly obtained. It was a narrow life that could be measured by such base pleasures, the satisfying of one's gross physical needs. He returned to find Ryan struggling to rise. Feeling a pang of mercy, or possibly guilt, Harry unbound his hands and helped him to his feet. "We've still a ways to go," he said. "We need to start." His eyes unfocused, head heavy, Ryan merely nodded, then followed Harry out of the tumble-down cottage. His lordship had clearly taken to heart Harry's threat, for he said nothing as they picked their way along the pathless hillsides. Harry had been making use of the Margates estate for longer than he'd been a thief, and knew its contours as though the land was his own. The route marked in his memory is a series of places. This bend of the creek, that storm-felled tree. Yet today, every step dragged at his feet, the gray light and damp air sapping his vigor and meddling with his eyes. Looking behind to be sure his captive was keeping pace, he caught a flicker of movement between the distant trees. A bird, a small animal, nothing of menace. Still, he could not help from looking back, pausing again and again to survey the empty forest as the cold morning became indifferent noon. At the summit of the next ridge, he stopped to sight down the valley before them. As at every halt, Ryan stood motionless, his head bowed, hands limp at his sides. He had fallen twice, and muddy leaves clung to his stockings and cloak. As Harry gazed out across the valley in search of a reliable landmark, Ryan resumed his shuffling gait, brushing past Harry to start down the hill. "Where are you going?" Harry called. Ryan stopped and slowly turned to him with a questioning expression. He glanced down the valley, then back at Harry. Then with a sigh began to climb back up. Behind him on the valley floor stood a stone-walled cottage, its peaked thatch roof hidden by a grove of saplings. Abandoned long before Harry had found it, the cottage was of the same construction as the hovel they sheltered in last night, built of local stone, daubed with chalky clay soil. Over the years of his quiet use, he had repaired the walls with stones scavenged from the ruin and replaced much of the thatch. It had proved a snug, if confining den in which to spend the previous winter, licking his wounds both bodily and spiritual. 2 miles from any road, and all but invisible unless one was standing nearly on top of it, he had known of no better place to store an inconvenient earl for a fortnight. Harry had never come at it from this approach. His face heating, he waved Ryan to turn him out. Never mind, you're headed the right way. And when I said you had to be quiet, I didn't mean for the rest of your life. On the hillside below, Ryan stopped yet again. He turned slowly to face Harry. Twigs sticking to his cloak and mud on his hands, tendrils of his black hair clinging damply to his brow like the stark black branches of the leafless trees stretching across the colorless sky, he nonetheless stood resolutely, at last looking the part of a son of privilege, a peer of the realm, untouched by any law but his own. "Is that so?" he said, his eyes glinting with a cold fire. "Then please allow me to express my thoughts of the last several hours, starting with, you can suck a rotten lemon, you hack-handed, rat-licking, deceitful, donkey-brained..." He broke off with a shudder of contempt before going on bitterly. "I trusted you. I cared for you. And you tossed that caring out the window and into the gutter like a turd, and I will never, ever forgive you. And for mugging's mercy's sake, you aren't even any good at this." He gestured angrily at the cottage in the valley below. "Your victim shouldn't be able to find your secretive hideout at a single glance." Staggered by the pointed tirade, Harry snatched the first defense to hand. "You only found it because I brought you here. I found it because I was looking in the direction it happened to lay. You'll note the absence from our environs of any other person who might see it. Perhaps because all there is to see in these mugging environments is this mugging hill. God Christ, why am I arguing with you? Just get your ass down the fucking hill, and keep your voice down or I won't hesitate to gag you." The Earl had already resumed his hobbling descent and gave no reply. Feeling like his head had been turned inside out, Harry followed.
Ooh.